Hello friends, welcome to part 3 of our series on neurodivergent cooking and particularly executive function in the kitchen. If you're new to this series, jump on back. I've done 2 videos so far, and you might want to check those out before we get into today's topic. We started with thinking about our needs, which we're going to apply to this in all the videos in the series, and then in the second video, the longest video of this series, talked a ton about figuring out what you want to eat, what do you want to cook, and deciding what your limits are around what you're willing to cook, etc. So that's really going to dovetail with today's video, which is going to be all about doing the shopping. Okay, so if you're neurodivergent, not everybody, but a lot of us do not love grocery stores, do not love the overwhelm of, particularly big supermarkets can just be like, oh my God. And shopping can be like weirdly tough. And I know I found this like strange for a long time, that I love looking at recipes as a special interest of mine. I love thinking about food, but I would walk into a grocery store and just could not. So, whether you're somebody who, we talked about like different ways of deciding what to eat in the last video. So whether you're somebody who, might have a basic plan for what you're cooking, whether you're, you've got some recipes in mind and some specific ingredients you're going to need, whether you are somebody who tends to just make go-tos out of their pantry, and so the staple ingredients that you're out of right now and need to pick up, or maybe you're just planning to wing it and get inspired by what you see in the store. Wherever you fall, now it's time to shop. So some tips about grocery store overwhelm, and we could call this farmer's market overwhelm, or small boutiques in cities, or whatever it is, online ordering overwhelm. But some tips here. So one is to consider pickup or online ordering if that's an option for you, especially if you tend to get impulsive and kind of buy all the wrong things, or forget to buy things. It can be really handy to just do, the pickup. A lot of places now have free pickup, and there are a lot of websites, like I use Thrive Market. This is not sponsored, but I use Thrive Market. I try not to use Amazon. I'm trying to detangle from Amazon. But, there's a lot of different places where you can get things online, particularly things that, pantry type items. So you might want to consider that if you get overwhelmed by grocery stores. Number 2 tip for grocery store overwhelm is, of course, to go in with a plan. And if you can, to organize your list by aisle, which can just be helpful if you have a vague idea of where things are in the store when you're walking around. I think there are so many like tips about grocery stores and how to avoid things. And I find that they're often kind of shamey, like food shaming, fat shaming, where it's like, oh, don't eat the junk food. Like, no, food is food, right? So I have no judgment on what you want to buy. But it can be helpful to just like have a plan of how you're going to go through the store, especially if you, like me, have a panic attack sometimes in the middle of the store and then you're done shopping for the day. Keeping in mind to include on your list not just ingredients for things you need to cook, but also, do you need some backup drinks, snacks, go to emergency food items, prepared foods, etc. that you're looking for. And number 3, actually, I just started to say it, which is to plan the specific things you need and also kind of like general categories. So you might be like, I need some work snacks. I need some stuff for a road trip coming up. I know that there's a potluck I need to bring something to. I know that I like to have, like veggies on hand, but I'm not picky about what they are. Things I can stir fry, right? And even if you do kind of like to wing it and just decide when you get there, keep in mind your goal kind of volume of food, because I at least find that when I'm winging it, sometimes I buy way too much food. So just like how, what do I really need? How quickly can I eat it to avoid things going bad? So I do something that's really extra. I don't know if, this may not be useful for anyone but me, but here's the extra thing I do. I actually have one of the digital tools I use as a spreadsheet that is my price comparison sheet. So I actually keep a spreadsheet of prices of everything that I buy. I just take a photo, usually of the receipt, or I did this for a while. Like a few months, and it got most of the things I buy. So I would take a photo of the receipt, I would take a photo of just like price labels in the store, or if it's online, I just find them online, and I would put in items and compare them store by store. That is not particularly accurate necessarily because things go on sale, prices change all the time with groceries, but it was a good kind of baseline. It helped, especially for like things that I always buy where there's a big difference, because sometimes there's a huge difference between stores. And of course, this is more important if you're budget conscious. It just helps you to avoid like really overpriced stuff that you don't realize is overpriced at a particular store. And then if I'm going to a store I don't go to all the time, like Trader Joe's or like Costco, and I know that there are certain things that are just better priced at that store, then I have my little list. Like, these are the things I always buy at Trader Joe's. That makes it easier. I like to just like highlight the items where it's going to make a big difference. If a lot of them I don't care. It's 20-cent difference. Like, it's going to change all the time. But if there's like a $5 difference in this thing, then I'm going to highlight like this, don't buy it at this store, and make it clear as well in my spreadsheet, some of the items that I always keep on hand. So these are my like pantry staples. I have, this is my list of the things that I always like to have versus specific recipes. I kind of mentioned this earlier, but if you're shopping and something is perishable, have a plan. So it can be helpful to kind of build around the perishable items, especially if you're not doing recipes, to think about how much, dairy or produce, or I guess meats. I don't eat meat. I'm like, it's meat, probably. Herbs, like things that are gonna become unpleasant or inedible. Think about how much of them you actually need, and then building around that. Something about volume, because I know I often do this where I'm like, oh, it's shelf stable and it's on sale, so I'm gonna buy 17 of it. Check the expiration date, because some things expire quicker than you think. We actually did a big food shop at Costco because we knew that a year or two ago, when we started to hear that grocery prices were going up, we're like, oh shit. Well, we've got space, so maybe we'll just buy a bunch of things. And oh my God, I made some poor decisions, and I have had to eat like the same thing 45 times in a row because it was running out, or because it was getting too close to the expiration date. So just like check. Canned things, for example, last a really long time, so that can be a good idea. But yeah, if you get excited about if you're ADHD and you get like impulsively excited about a sale, just like see what the expiration date is. Think realistically about like how much of that thing you actually use in a recipe, per recipe, etc. And don't forget to think about how much space you have. I had a roommate where it was, bless their heart, I love them, but like, oh my God, they would always buy more freezer stuff than we had space, and then it was like stressfully trying to Tetris it. Ask yourself if you're going to use it, how you're going to use it. And then I like to get smaller, even though they're a little more expensive usually, I like to get smaller containers for perishable things. So I mentioned like vegetable broth is something that is in a lot of vegan recipes, but I don't actually use it that much. Instead of the big one like that, it's more expensive, but you can get these little ones in like a 4-pack. So I get the little 4-pack. I don't have it anymore in my grocery store. It's kind of sad, but or like vegetable broth is an example where it's like you can get the version of it, so you could get bouillon cubes or something that's shelf stable. Like if you don't really like drink wine, but you use wine in cooking, you can get the little mini bottles of wine, so you're not opening a whole bottle of wine. And sometimes spending a little more is worth it. I mentioned this a bit in the last video. Keeping in mind like what the category of thing is, and is it going to be going into a recipe with a bunch of other things where you're not going to really notice the taste, or is it the star of a dish? I think this is something where you get more of a sense over time if you know a little bit about ingredients that you often use. I recently learned that salt is not created equal. And it's maybe obvious to you, but like, I don't know, I always use the same salt. And I learned about like all the different tastes of salt. I was like, oh wow, interesting. If you try, you try different price points, different qualities to see like, do I notice the difference? For example, if you're using an oil for like finishing or something where you're not cooking with the oil, you're actually like drizzling it, then you can really taste the difference. So if you're like dipping bread in olive oil, you might want a higher quality olive oil than you would need for cooking. And in fact, you don't want a high quality olive oil for cooking because it'll smoke at a different temperature. I don't really care about which like vegan butter. I just stick on a meal. But if I'm baking, I do, because all the vegan butters are wildly different in cookies. I like minute rice just fine if it's like in a casserole, but if I'm just having a bowl of rice, I mentioned my safe food with rice and lemon and butter, I just don't like the texture. There's something about minute rice that weirds me out. So, I just know that I use it for some things and not others. You can think about, can you substitute similar items, not because you necessarily need to substitute, but to avoid buying more than you need. So if you have a recipe that calls for something that's sort of close to another thing that you have, and you might think about that. I don't know, like one kind of soy sauce versus another kind of soy sauce, like, does it matter? Sometimes it does, but sometimes it doesn't. I personally really like buying things that are pre-done. So if you are somebody where one of your needs is that you need to have fewer spoons used, physical effort minimized, it costs a little more, but I found that if I really compare like the cost of time and effort and pain of doing certain things, and whether I'm actually going to cook or not, then it's better for me to buy pre-chopped veggies. You can often get them in the produce department. Sometimes you have to use them faster because they're pre-chopped, and you have to be careful, but pre-chopped veg, frozen veggies. I keep frozen onions just in my freezer. I can't believe I didn't start doing that sooner, because I cry when I chop onions. So if you cry when you chop onions, frozen onions, not perfect. There's often a little bit of peel in there, and you don't get to control, is it sliced or chopped or whatever, but like just throwing them in a recipe, those things are great. Frozen spinach, frozen broccoli, things like that. Especially too, like if you tend to do recipes that don't call for vegetables, like having just like I can throw some frozen broccoli with that is really handy. I like the little garlic and ginger cubes. You can get them at Trader Joe's. I think it's called Dorot or Doro. I don't know the language, but they're these little like packages of like 25 little cubes of ginger or garlic that are frozen, and so they're really easy to just pop them out into a recipe. You can also get the squeezy tubes, but they go bad quicker and they cost more. I just don't buy. Fresh garlic's good, but I just don't buy it really anymore unless it's like roasted garlic or something in a recipe. I like frozen cooked rice a lot. It's just easier for me. I like canned beans. I like spice blends rather than like trying to make sure I have every single spice. I'm often just like, whatever, is this similar? But it depends on how sensitive your taste is. And the last thing I'll say about the shopping portion of the program is, if you are a fan of winging it, if you're somebody who, maybe you're just like are more creative, more intuitive when it comes to cooking, and you really like to use fresh seasonal ingredients, you're not always sure what's going to be there, there's definitely like a benefit that, I keep a lot of like recipes on hand, but I've noticed that I just like started getting rid of ones that are like, this thing is available for 2 weeks, because I usually do pickup, and so I don't know whether stuff's available. But if you're going to the farmer's market all the time, right, you might actually want recipes on hand that use those things. If you're somebody like that, one thing is you might want to have a recipe manager that works on your phone, because that's really handy to be like, okay, there's figs in season, what's figs, and especially if you don't get that overwhelmed by a grocery store and you're okay kind of standing there and figuring it out on the fly. If you like to wing it, but you tend to get stuck in a rut and you always find yourself going to the same things, you might want to try something like, there's a book called The Flavor Bible. There's also a vegetarian flavor Bible. I found that really useful, trying to encourage my own self, because my autism is like rigid rules, trying to like teach myself to be a little more creative, or to try different flavor combinations, or to adjust recipes. I really like the Flavor Bible, because you basically go to the page and it'll be like basil, and it's like, here's everything that goes with that. So you can literally like just flip through and like this with this with this, or you can, I want to substitute, like what would something go with? So yeah, a resource like that can be really useful. Of course, you can find tons of substitutions online. You just Google whatever substitute. So that can be helpful as well if you're more of a winging it person. Okay, so we're almost done in video number 4. We're going to talk about cooking itself, doing the cooking. We'll talk a little bit about food storage as well at the end, and we'll talk about evaluating how it went, basically, and deciding whether you want to keep a recipe. So I hope you'll stay tuned. Remember that you can sign up below. Newsletter is the place to find me, and I do lots of different neurodivergent things. So if you're interested in stuff like this, if you like nerdy things, if you like neurodivergent things, I'm not just on YouTube, so you want to check out my newsletter for across all the places to know what I am doing. And if you would like, leave a comment and let me know. How does shopping go for you? Do you get grocery store overwhelm? How does it go? Do you like to shop at a bunch of different places? Do you really care about keeping track of prices and things? If you do, how do you do it? And yeah, what tips would you have? Especially if you're somebody who wings it, because I don't wing it, you may have guessed. So if you're somebody who wings it and you have some great tips for shopping and like doing things on the fly, please let us know. I'm sure folks would love to hear from you. And we'll see you in the last video.